it's insidious. It's slowly but surely creeping in, and by the time certainly that I'm aware of it, it's too late. There are lots of issues to deal with. Anecdotally, I know that locally there have been certain organisations who have been brought into Catholic institutions. When it was questioned or queried by a parent, the response of that school, a leading secondary grammar school within the area, was to advise, the solution was to advise the parent to keep their child at home for period 1, which I find absolutely abhorrent. I find it completely unacceptable to say that my child is going to be marked present but can't attend school because of, had I been that parent, I would have been at the gate.
Welcome back to Gript Media. I'm your host, Maria Mains. Today I am joined by Sheila Fullerton. She is a secondary school teacher from County Derry in Northern Ireland, and today I'm going to be interviewing her about the various changes which she has seen in secondary education over the last 5 years or so, as well as the promotion of ideologies in schools, including gender ideology, queer theory, transgenderism, and what this means for children and parents in Northern Ireland. Thank you, Sheila, for joining us.
Thank you, Maria. It's very lovely to be here.
It's great to have you. So you have been in education for many years now, and there are some issues that are facing teachers at present. One of these issues is the promotion of different ideologies. As a teacher, how do you perceive this is an issue, that certain ideologies are maybe being promoted in schools under the guise of curriculum or pastoral care?
Being a teacher truly is a position of privilege. It's both a vocation as well as a profession. And I think that to be true to most people within the profession, that is something that kind of feeds and informs us all, because we are dealing with young lives, very impressionable young lives, very precious young lives, and we want to educate them holistically, both as a subject teacher, but also the child at the heart of that. So one of the big things in education when I started was looking at how, as a teacher with our various hats, in terms of areas of curriculum within the pastoral system within schools, was making sure that all children were catered for in terms of their needs holistically. So supporting them in their social development, their physical development, their emotional development, cognitive development, and their spiritual development. So they had their specs on, SPECS, for want of a better expression. And that was very much driven forward so that there was very much a balance within education, and all of the elements and all of the very rigorous debates that should take place within the classroom took place under this guise. I am very fortunate to be teaching within the Catholic sector, and also to have come through the Catholic education sector as a pupil. So I feel very protective of the Catholic sector within education, and I know that within Northern Ireland alone, faith-based schools, there's a lot of very politically charged conversation around, you know, the faith-based schools, and a lot of the problems endemic within our society is really levied at, I suppose, oh well, you know, we have a separate school system. But if we're truly to live in a pluralist, tolerant, fully inclusive and truly inclusive society, we have to have a place for faith-based schools, for integrated schools, for state schools, for controlled schools. So there has to be space for faith-based schools within that sector. There has been a subtle shift from within Catholic schools, and I'm speaking specifically in relation to Catholic schools, from the Christocentric to a movement which is child-centric, which in and of itself is a very positive thing. Very, very positive thing. But when you begin to just look at child-centric, and you're not looking at child-centric within the values of Christ, or having the child and Christ at the centre of that in terms of ethos, then we have a problem, because it opens a gateway or a doorway for more secular values to infiltrate corridors, all of which arguably is coming from a very good place and a very well-intentioned place, but it's a very damaging place, and it's a place where things can, that allows certain ideologies, certain beliefs, from teachers in and of themselves, if they're feeling very strongly or, advocating very strongly for something else, that it allows that fluid shift in goalposts, which can slowly but surely erase Catholic ethos, Christian ethos from the corridors, and make it a very isolating and lonely place, not just for if you want to put a label on a Catholic teacher, or a teacher who would identify as a teacher, a person of faith, but also for that little child in the classroom who is also a Catholic child. We have to cater for the needs of all children before us, but not at the expense of one or the other. So in terms of Catholic ethos, we very much have to tread that balance right, and to listen to Pope Francis in his warning when he is addressing us, saying cultural, ideological colonization. It's one thing to be with the culture in the moment. It's one thing to speak the language of the moment, but it's a different ballgame whenever we allow ourselves, either as people of faith, as teachers of faith, or as institutions which advertise themselves as Catholic institutions, to become ideologically colonized. And there's this subtle but very, very, very nuanced and important detail. The devil is in the detail when we look at that.
In the Republic of Ireland, Sheila, we've seen a lot of controversy over the NCCA and proposals to bring in gender theory and queer theory and all of these different ideologies into the curriculum for pupils, especially in secondary education. Have you seen the same sort of thing happening in the north, in Northern Ireland?
This is very much an all-island issue. These ideologies, these very sensitive issues that we are dealing with don't respect boundaries or borders or anything like that, because they fundamentally affect the very heart of humanity. So my answer to that, Maria, is quite simply yes, I have. I am concerned, I'm very concerned about the word I would use to describe its introduction. It's insidious. It's slowly but surely creeping in, and by the time, certainly that I'm aware of it, it's too late. And then, there are lots of issues to deal with. Anecdotally, I know that locally there have been certain organisations who have been brought into Catholic institutions, and when it was questioned or queried by a parent, the response of that school, of a leading secondary school, a leading secondary grammar school within the area, was to advise, the solution was to advise the parent to keep their child at home for period 1, which I find absolutely abhorrent. I find it completely unacceptable to say that my child is going to be marked present but can't attend school because of, had I been that parent, I would have been at the gate, because we have to be fully inclusive, and it doesn't matter if there is 1 or 10 or 100, we have to cater for the needs of all children. In trying to be inclusive in terms of a secular understanding or even a humanist understanding of that word, we're actually creating an invisible minority. where we are we're being discriminatory towards the Catholic child. And, that is very much anti-Catholic. And I thought in a society, particularly within Northern Ireland, where we have come through issues of religion, where people have been so very tragically damaged and hurt over the years, over decades, historically, I thought we had moved so far beyond that. So there is very much an invisible, but very, very tangible anti-Catholic outworking of that. And I suppose that's why I'm here speaking to you today, because I am at the point where I am very concerned. I'm very concerned, first as a teacher. I'm very concerned, I would say, as a Catholic. I'm very concerned as a grandmother about what the next generation is going to be exposed to and how that is going to contravene and conflict with the values that I would be bringing, would be developing within my own homestead. And I think that there is a duty of care to speak up for others who maybe are unaware of that.
There is, I know you mentioned, Sheila, about workshops and organisations which are coming into Catholic schools. There is one specific organisation, it's called Cara Friend, and we've personally heard from other teachers within Northern Ireland that this organisation is coming into schools. That is an organisation which advises, students who are still developing, who are under 18 years of age, different ways in which to deal with feeling, with gender dysphoria. And there are very contested things that they say. For example, advising kids to use chest binders, if they don't want to be a female, if they don't want to develop that way. There are loads of concerns from parents about, are their children being told that puberty blockers are okay, that these things don't pose any threats to kids. So this is a huge issue. That is that organisation specifically. Surely this is something which is very controversial for parents who are sending their children, especially in faith schools, and maybe they're having a group like this in to speak to students. I mean, where do you think most parents stand on that? And are they informed? Is there a risk that parents are losing their rights here over their children?
I would say, to answer your question, the parent voice there, and to make sure that parents are informed at all times and all stages, is really, really important. My one issue would be presenting to parents these groups coming in as a fait accompli. Where is the discussion? You mentioned a specific group there, Cara Friend, and I do know that they are in lots of schools, certainly. They have been brought into lots of Catholic schools, and I know that. My one concern about is that they're very much advocates for a particular life, life choices,
like a worldview that's very different.
Very, very, very different. And you've mentioned chest binding and puberty blockers and all of those things. There's a lot of things there that parents need, there needs to be consultation with parents about bringing in organisations that are going to be, maybe introducing concepts to some children for the first time. There has to be consultation in school as well to be brought in. Without parent consultation, without consultation of staff, and without that open, informed, fully inclusive. And that's what I keep coming back to. We can't have, we won't have a school that is keeping at its heart the Catholic ethos.
Yeah, and Sheila, like you just mentioned, with groups coming in, different workshops and things, there was a lot of controversy. I remember this time last year, there was an integrated school in Belfast, a secondary school, who had a sort of feminism conference day held on a Saturday, and there was a poster making workshop. They had politicians from the SDLP, they had Alliance for Choice, which is an abortion campaign group, People Before Profit politicians, Alliance as well. And I do remember seeing there were images where posters were made with the phrasing, with pupils, holding these posters with the phrasing, keep your rosaries off our ovaries, which is obviously a very, popular slogan that abortion campaigners use. So we've seen this happen in Northern Ireland. Do you feel, obviously, I take it you feel that's unacceptable, and if there was consultation that this sort of situation wouldn't unfold, why do you think we're seeing this happening?
Well, you've brought up the incident in Hazelwood Integrated School there this time last year, and I think if you were to ask me for one example of one tangible example for the outworking of this invisible anti-Catholic vibe, there we have it. Because you have a school, you've mentioned it was on a Saturday, but it was a workshop. Am I right in saying that it was organised by a member of staff?
Yeah, I believe
within,
so.
I think within that, I would need to go back
in the school,
within the school
with pupils,
with pupils from that school. And again, you have there an ideology being very much driven. Integrated education, is that not where we are supposed to have this open dialogue, where we're bringing people of all faiths and no faith together? Where's the parity in that instance? Where is the pro-life voice? And not only is there very clearly an absence of pro-life there, the outworkings of that workshop that you mentioned is very, very definitely and definitively anti-Catholic, because it goes unchallenged, because there is no voice for anybody who speaks, who identifies as a person of faith, even within a Catholic school. And that's how bold it has been. So if we are, and I keep coming back to this, to live in a fully inclusive, tolerant society, we can't have the inculcation of this, that's sectarian attack on people who identify as being faithful, because I would identify as being very pro-life and would very much advocate for life from the moment of conception up until natural death. I make no apologies for that. I can't say that in school. I can't say that, I'm saying it now, but it's really the first time that publicly I have admitted that, because there is a fear of putting your head above the parapet and disagreeing with the popular narrative.
Maybe the loudest voice. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, the term cancel culture, there is very much a cancel culture tangible for anybody who identifies as being a person of faith in school or outside of school. And that is a very tangible example of that.
Do you feel as though there are some teachers, I think a lot of teachers, from what we hear, for example, they want to go to school and they want to teach their subject, and they don't, that's what they want to do. They don't want to have to be involved with ideologies or different sort of theories and things like gender theory. But do you feel as though there is a push within schools from certain teachers? Is this coming from staff as well, that maybe pupils are being taught contested things about gender or sex education, these sorts of topics?
Within schools, there are grave difficulties within school when it comes to that, to the use of pronouns and alternative pronouns. And what I would counsel in terms of that is that in terms of gender ideology and gender transition, gender ideology is an ideology, to the best of my knowledge, at the moment. And therefore, it's not supported or underwritten by science or or anything like that. So we have to tread very, very carefully, because these are huge, life-changing, life-altering decisions that young people are making at a very, very young age. And I would also say that there's a lot of information now making its way out from people who are now detransitioning, and it's not getting the same airspace or talking time as the big push in terms of gender ideology. So I would counsel very strongly against that. In terms of the alternative pronoun issue, I think we have to be very careful with that. I personally would think that perhaps a way around for somebody like Mr. Burke would be to avoid using particular pronouns, and that there has to be protection for teachers who don't subscribe to this new way of thinking, or perhaps that's not the right phrase to use there.
Do you think there should be a choice in terms of
Very
whether
much.
a teacher chooses to address the pupil by these new pronouns, and they go by, for example, what's on the birth certificate? They're allowed to do that?
Absolutely. I think that there, again, you mentioned Hazelwood earlier and Alliance for Choice, but where is the choice and the freedom in terms of whether that's being a conscientious objector in terms of religious faith, and so we have to be as mutually respectful within the parameters of our beliefs as possible. There has to be a platform that allows for a disagreement there, respectful disagreement. You can't enforce something like that within a school. So schools do need to tread very carefully there.
You're also, Sheila, I understand, running as a candidate for Aontú in the upcoming council elections. So with regards to that and your campaign, is education something which you think will feature quite heavily, something you're quite passionate about?
Absolutely. My subject is English. Education is very much at the heart of my campaign in terms of the issues that we have talked about as well. I would say very much to get this parity there, to protect, to ensure that faith-based schools have a place in our society alongside non-faith and integrated. In terms of what I want to do in the promotion of education, absolutely. I think that literacy rates have dropped greatly, and we really need to focus on that, because if we are truly to invest in our future generation and the future legacy, we have to give them those fundamental skills of being able to write, to being able to read, to being able to communicate, to articulate their views, to develop that, if you like, literal resilience within themselves, because it opens doorways, it opens opportunities for children. So yes, very much education is very much at the heart of my campaign for Aontú. Yeah.
And along with, I think there's also a sense in this country that a lot of things are sort of brought in and we don't really have a proper discussion about them. So for instance, with teachings in schools and the promotion of transgenderism, that is something as well that you feel as though we need to talk about.
Absolutely. These are huge issues that are reshaping society, that are that will shape the legacy, our future legacy of society. So not to talk about them and not to have an open, honest, respectful conversation and to have that dialogue doesn't make any sense to me. How are we ever going to move forward and to bring everybody forward with it, in a healthy, informed way without having discussion? If we bring it back to the 6 counties here in the north of Ireland, one of the big issues was there was no communication You know, it's just, you know, we need to have discussion. We need to talk, because if we don't, we are creating little sects within society, and that breeds and inflames conflict, and it also breeds ignorance. And in ignorance, there's a lot of damage done, and I would much rather engage in the difficult conversations than try and do damage control when it's too late afterwards.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila. I think we've had a good comprehensive discussion about these different issues. So thank you very much for joining us and taking the time.
Thank you, Maria. It was a pleasure.